Converted man here. Oh, good. S.J. Thompson. I just can't quit. I just can't. I know I should, but anyways. So, objective morality, subjective morality, and what's always seeming to be missing from this conversation is ethics. And I've said that many times before, but I'll keep saying it until people start including ethics in these discussions, because I don't know what your system of ethics is. So that helps determine what your morals will be. But regardless, okay, so what does it mean to say that morals are not objective? It means that they are subjective to each individual and in each time that that person finds themselves born into, to some extent. But it also means that there's not a single way of approaching any given target. That the idea don't kill is wrong, isn't objectively wrong, because there might be times when killing is an unfortunate necessity, either because of self defense or because of war or whatever. So to say that something is wrong, you want to avoid it. You don't want to do it. You don't. So that's kind of the reason we have these morals, is so that we have rules in our brains that we try to follow. Of course, we might not follow them, but the ideal is there. So maybe the ideal is don't kill, and you might have to go against it, but then that wouldn't be objective. It would be subject to different situations that you might find yourself in. Now, you might say, well, but it's objectively good or objectively bad to kill. Well, what evidence is there for that? Because you're making a statement about reality, not about viewpoint. And when we're talking about morals, we're talking about behavior. How do we behave? Or how ought we to behave? How should we behave? And I think that unless you are including ethics in that discussion, you're going to miss a lot there, because the ethical grounding for morals gives you a map to aim at least. Different moral systems have a different map, and if you want to learn a little bit more about different ethical systems, I have a video talking about abortion and ethics, and only a couple of the ethical systems I didn't know that much about, because they're really big or complicated. But nonetheless, you have a goal to aim at. And so your morals will then aim towards that goal. So in utilitarian ethics, although there's different versions of it, but my version at any rate, do the least harm to the least amount, the most good for the most amount. Well, what does harm mean? Somebody could ask that. Well, physical damage, mental damage, those are harmful. So avoid those, and not just of people, but consider animals and the planet as well. And what you put as a higher priority might depend upon a number of factors. It's probably going to be humans, because that's what we are. So we're going to tend to place ourselves above other animals. If there's a animal runs across, the highway, I'm not stopping. That animal's getting flattened by my vehicle. Uh, Slamming on my brakes is only going to hurt me and potentially somebody else. Yeah, I would slow down, but that thing's getting squashed. Um, the the thing is, your ethical system and your morals, or your morals depend on your ethical system, but your ethical system has to be picked by you, or you have to agree to it at the very least, and that is a subjective process to some degree because it's pretty much impossible, I would say, to say that one ethical system is the only right and true ethical system. Although I suppose somebody would say that, or could say that, there would be no way to demonstrate that. This is what we call meta ethics. That examining all the ethical systems, there are some similarities and dissimilarities, and I suppose you could rank them and call certain ones worse than others. I certainly think that DCT, which is divine command theory, is the worst ethical system. I don't even really view it as an ethical system, but it's called that, so uh, you know, I guess that's what we have to call it. But the the morals that you have will then map to whatever ethical system you picked or that was picked for you and you agree with you. And that selection in and of itself is somewhat, to some degree, subjective. Or it might be that we aren't really picking it as much as we might like to think because we're a product of uh, our biology and the environment that we're in. So a lot of the ways that we are isn't really up to us. Our personality isn't really up to us to some degree. You can change somewhat, but how much, who knows? So it might be that your ethical system is picked for you to some degree, not by an outside agent, but by your own persona, your own personality. It doesn't matter if all humans or many humans have come to some sort of consensus on morals in this day and age. In fact, that's exactly what we would expect to happen given how evolution functions. Now, in this case, it would be evolution of ideas rather than just people. But the two go hand in hand because the societies that have morals that do not function, that society will not last very long. So, a society that has human sacrifice might not last as long as a society that doesn't. And whichever society lives longer had a better chance of survival, and therefore, whatever morals that society did or did not have will be passed on to other humans that will scatter across the globe and potentially make more civilizations, and then the process will repeat. Now, of course, you could also have convergent evolution where different groups of people have found that, certain things are good to hold to as a society because it benefits the individual and the whole. So that's still not objective. Unless you pick what you're going to base your whole thing on. We could say, okay, well, let's pick human well-being as our objective. You had to pick it, so it's still subjective. But now it becomes objective because you're saying, okay, from this point on, all my morals are going to point towards human well-being. Then all my morals have a goal, and that goal in and of itself is an objective goal. Although my selection of that was subjective. Ultimately, it was subjective at some level, and there's no way around that. Even with DCT, because even with divine command theory, you still have to pick which god you believe in. So you have to pick which divineness that you think is true and which flavor of which divineness that you think is true. It does no good to just say that God makes it so that good is really real and that evil is really real. That doesn't do any good because you haven't defined what things you think are good, which is the whole entire purpose of of the ethical framework is so that you can figure out what things are valuable and what things aren't. And it's not really surprising that we would come to similar conclusions about major ideas, if not minor ones. And of course, referencing back to SJ, she likes to make broad generalizations about that everybody is like this and all. No, there's tribes that exist that don't have the complex moral quandaries that we have, and they have wholly different systems. I read about this one tribe where if you do something wrong, the entire tribe uh, surrounds you and tells you all the good things that you used to do and reminds you of how much they love you and stuff like this. And this seems to function very well. Imagine that in our day and age. When somebody commits a crime, everybody just surrounds that person and says, "We love you. Remember all the good you did." We don't have that. It's just not how our thing functions. And who knows how long this society will last? We don't know. Um, and and so if your objective is to have a society that lasts as long as possible, that too then would be a subjective uh, goal that then you could make. Once you have the goal, then yeah, that's objective. Okay, that's my goal. That's my objective goal. That's the object that I'm going towards. There you go. And I know that it's troubling when we hear, well, morals are so, they're just subjective or whatever, because it's like, well, but then, of course, the Nazis always bring, oh, what about the not, if the Nazis had succeeded, it might well be that they could have convinced a large number of people that they were right. I don't think they would have convinced everybody. They would have had to kill a whole lot of people to, have it be that you'd have to have, just babies at that point that were indoctrinated into the beliefs. Let's say something as insane as that happens somehow, which is, you know, an insanely difficult thought experiment, but okay. And you were born into that society. Well, the thing is, if the society lived long enough, it's completed its goal of that only a certain color and only a certain type of people are desired. One genetic uh, disease could wipe everybody out. There's no diversity of genetics there, so that's a problem in and of itself. You might also see less technology because you have less innovation. A necessity is the mother of invention. So once you reach the goal of, well, we wiped out all the people that are undesirable, you need a new undesirable target, or the thing sort of falls apart. So eventually, it would probably eat itself and not survive as a functioning society. Would the individual think that it was a just or good society? They might indeed view it that way, but they might also rebel because there are people that rebel against what society says is right or wrong. And sometimes they have a point, and sometimes they don't. Or if they did have a point, they're wiped aside by the society. So it's dangerous to have opposing views in a sense, but thankfully we have the ability to speak those different ideas out there. If there was a set of things that we knew was absolutely correct in every circumstance, that would make life a lot easier. But life is just too complicated to have a very simple set of rules that are always going to be true no matter what. Maybe you could get a few in there. You can maybe get, I don't want to give a number, but maybe you could figure out a few and say, well, this is, look, we can all agree that this is bad. Yeah, we probably can all agree on. But a consensus doesn't make that an objective thing. It just means everybody agrees that that's a good idea. And there might, of course, there's going to be the one person that rebels against that at some point, more than likely. So, as with many things, SJ, he just hasn't really, I don't know, I don't want to say hasn't thought it out, but I don't know, just like you, yeah, anyways. So, morality uh, is somewhat subjective to some degree, but it depends what your ethical system is, because that's then going to pin down your morals to that objective idea, which is why I said, as my comment, name what moral is objective and what ethical system it belongs in, because that is what he would have to give us, or anybody that thinks that morals are absolutely objective. Every single moral, or every single ethical system, or if I pick a different ethical system, then that moral might not be objective anymore. So, really, wouldn't you be saying that ethics is objective? Which it kind of is, as it's a written down system, but somebody had to decide what that system was, so ultimately it's subjective to some degree. So because it's a human endeavor, it doesn't seem there's a way out of it. But you can view it however you want to view it, because, well, that's something humans can do. I like to have the analogy that it's the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. That the letter of the law might be your ethical system, but the spirit of the law is your morals. So yes, it's wrong to kill people. That's the letter of the law. The spirit of the law is more about trying to stay on that path, uh, and not go off. But there might be some insane situation where you have to. Hopefully not. All right. Well, I'll tell you what is objective: lobsters. They do exist. We can all agree on that, except for the one person that's going to disagree, and screw that person. All right. That's all I got for you.